Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Aujourd'hui, je vous propose un entretien exceptionnel avec Neal Roberts. C'est un avocat américain spécialiste des lanceurs d'alerte qui nous a rendu visite en France. Aux États-Unis, les lanceurs d'alerte, ils peuvent être protégés, ils peuvent être soutenus et parfois rémunérés quand ils révèlent des fraudes ou des crimes financiers. Ce que très peu de gens savent, par contre, c'est que ces lois qui protègent les lanceurs d'alerte, elles s'appliquent aussi aux citoyens européens, aux citoyens africains, aux citoyens du monde entier d'ailleurs, dès lors que les faits qui sont signalés par les lanceurs d'alerte concernent des entreprises cotées en bourse aux États-Unis ou en tout cas actives aux États-Unis. Ces dispositifs de protection et de rétribution des lanceurs d'alerte, ils changent beaucoup de choses puisqu'ils peuvent devenir de véritables leviers d'action, y compris depuis l'étranger, pour sanctionner des multinationales, notamment des multinationales américaines qui commettent des abus, des fraudes ou de la corruption, que ce soit sur le sol américain ou en dehors du territoire national américain. Alors, comment ça fonctionne? Qui peut en bénéficier? Et surtout, pourquoi c'est une opportunité pour les lanceurs d'alerte non américains? Réponse tout de suite avec Neal Roberts du cabinet d'avocats ProtectUS Law.
Today's conversation is with a man who has stood at the crossroads of corporate power and government accountability, Neal Roberts.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello, Neal. It's great seeing you. Thanks for joining us. Can you start by giving us a snapshot of what ProtectUS Law does and what your role is in it today?
Sure. I'm the managing partner of a law firm in the United States called ProtectUS Law, as in protect the U.S., among other things. We bring lawsuits against large corporations that do very bad things, and we do it in a variety of ways.
Okay. Your firm is unique in that it includes former whistleblowers as partners. What inspired that model, and how has it shaped the way you approach your cases?
So most American law firms in the 50 states, 48 states except for two, you must go to law school, you must pass the bar, and you must be a lawyer to be in the law firm and to participate in finding cases and in researching cases and sharing if there's any proceeds. The District of Columbia has a unique rule, along with Arizona, that says that if you supervise the person and go through a vetting of the person and then explain to them the rules, as long as there's a lawyer supervising the person, they can be a real partner in the firm. So if we have a great conversation and you wanted to be a partner, you could be a partner.
I would love to, actually. That's a great plan for me to follow.
So we've have in our firm lawyers who pass the bar, who do the work, licensed in the district and licensed in California and Maryland and Connecticut, and then we have non-lawyer members who've had great life experiences, but the only thing they have in common at the moment is most of them have been whistleblowers and brought in to the United States government hundreds of millions of dollars. We should probably explain that we're outside, and you can hear the birds if you listen carefully, near a castle. It's just great.
It is. What a view. Special here with you today. You've personally filed and led some landmark whistleblower lawsuits. Could you walk us through one or two of the most impactful cases you've worked on?
Well, I really have two roles. One is that I'm the managing partner of a law firm, and we bring cases on behalf of people. If, for instance, you were inside a large American company that had a big contract with the government and you knew they were doing something bad, you could be my client. We'd bring that kind of case. But earlier, before I started the law firm, I was the whistleblower. And so I was working in a large consultancy and discovered that the consultancies were all cheating on their government contracts. And so I brought it to the attention of the various folks in the companies, and they said, well, you should be quiet.
Okay.
So I knew about this law, and I found some other lawyers to help me, because you have to be a whistleblower, you have to have another lawyer. You can't just do it yourself.
Of course.
And we filed about 18 lawsuits, I think, over 2-3 years against these consultancies. And basically, they had a set of kickbacks going on. where they put money back and forth, and thus they were not giving to the government. And so those schemes were, you actually file a lawsuit, but it's hidden, so it's sealed. And those cases were reviewed by the Department of Justice, and they had a set of investigators, and they decided that yes, they were owed money back. And so they went to those companies and they said, would you like to go all the way to court, or would you like to settle? And so they said, well, we'll probably settle because we like dealing with the government. And in fact, they all said they'd made a mistake. They had had some lower echelon folks who'd done some things they shouldn't have. So the government said, okay, we'll settle. And they settled and collected a large amount of money, almost $500 million of money. And then they continued to do work with the government and changed their ways. And every contract with the government now includes that they won't do the things that they did. Yeah. And then the lawyers got paid, and I got paid a bunch of money, not a great deal, but some. Well, enough. And then I founded this law firm to represent other people.
Oh, that's very admirable.
Well, it's great fun, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Many whistleblowers face retaliation or financial hardship. How do you support them through the process?
There's various whistleblowing rules, okay, in America. There's whistleblowing rules if they cheat, the companies or individuals cheat the government. It's called the False Claims Act. There's rewards if the companies cheat their investors. There's rewards if the companies cheat the revenue service. And there's rewards if the banks, like companies, do money laundering and the like. Each of those statutes has a section which says if you're an employee, you have a right to come forward. So the company says, shh, and the statute says, no, you have to come forward. So if there's a retaliation, which is what you're describing, the employee is going to get back his salary plus double what he didn't make, plus his legal fees. But that doesn't help the employee during the middle of it because you don't know if it's a good case yet, right? Because there's a lot of employees and a lot of stories. So the answer is there's a reward at the end of the process if they're successful, but there's an awful lot of whistleblowers who live in poverty because you can't work again if they find out about you, and you have no income, and you hope the case wins, but not all of them win. So amongst our whistleblower members, there's one wonderful member who went against the drug company. It took him 6 years. He was a salesman for a drug company. You can go to our website, ProtectUS Law, and read his story, Blair Hamrick, and you can get the name of the drug company. But he was completely impoverished. He lived in a trailer for 6 years. And then eventually the case is settled, and the company paid $3 billion. And part of, he didn't have all that, but he had some of that he'd brought. And he eventually got enough money that he now can live, but he had 6 hard years of impoverishment. So you have to be sort of either brave or crazy to be a whistleblower.
Well, you got to see the light at the end of the tunnel if there is one.
You got to hope.
Hopefully. Speaking of the False Claims Act, actually, what are the biggest challenges today in prosecuting white-collar crime or corporate fraud under the False Claims Act?
If you've been talking to me over the last 20 years, I would have a list. If you're talking to me in 2025, there's a whole range of uncertainty going on because the American government at the moment and the Department of Justice, which enforces it, seems to be having some issues as to how it focuses, right? What it thinks is important. So part of the challenge we face at the moment is to figure out if you bring a case along any of the ones we're talking about, a false claims case or a securities case or whatever, will there be resources in the government to investigate it? Because there's been wholesale trimming, firing, letting go inside the United States federal government. they're down about 10% already because they said, you want to retire? Yes. So some of the best resources to investigate are missing. So at the moment we don't quite know if when we bring a case there'll be anybody in there to care. And as we sit here today, I can't tell you what the SEC from the top is telling its folks because it's losing resources, and at the moment the priorities seem to be changing all the time. The shaping of this different government is done through executive orders. There's been literally hundreds. From all the presidents since eternity, there have been executive orders, but there's never been hundreds. One of the challenges is that whole programs can be abolished with one of these executive orders. I think one of the most troubling and sad ones is, if you're in my kind of world of trying to hold companies accountable, is that we had a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and it said that American companies or foreign companies that use our financial markets, meaning they're on Wall Street and they're listed, can't bribe foreign officials, can't go to a kingdom somewhere, whether it's South America or Africa, and they're not necessarily kingdoms, a republic, and come in and say, well, we'd like a contract with the health system, and go to the head of the health minister and say, here's a check for $25 million. Could you give us the $200 million contract? So the Congress said that's a very bad idea. And an executive order said no more enforcement.
In the US, whistleblowers, even foreign nationals, can be financially rewarded for providing information that leads to enforcement actions. Could you walk us through how these reward mechanisms work and how they've shaped the global landscape for whistleblower law?
Wow, it's a long question. Did you just record it? Oh, good. Sure. If there is a person anywhere in the world inside a large company, the large company might well be dealing one way or another with the United States. And it might well be dealing one way or another with a process that entails something the government's doing. So in the case of the False Claims Act, it has to do with a contract with a government that someone's cheating on. The reason it's called False Claims Act is that's a fancy word for cheating, right? Make a false claim. So what I would say is, if you're out there as that person, or a lawyer who knows that person, depending on what's at stake, you might have a case. Meaning the individual inside big global company, and the more danger to humans, the more likely the case works. So if the drug company is, this famous case where the Sacklers put together a company to produce opioids and said they were very safe, and they put out a pain monitor that said, take this test. And then they got the government to buy lots of these drugs, and then they got lots of people addicted, and they got people that put it. So whistleblowers came forward and said, this is wrong, and the Sacklers are now out of business. They're still rich. And the states have billions of dollars now from their whistleblowing cases. And some whistleblowers have done very well by going against the pharmacies that knew they were doing it, or the doctors that knew they were doing it. So the answer is, if you know there's something wrong, something fishy, if it smells bad, it's probably bad, and you have a lot of money at stake or danger to people at stake, then you come to either our colleagues here in Europe or come to us directly, and we can see if you have a case. And you might not. And there's, in terms of government contracts, there's only about 600 filed of these cases a year, and the government only takes maybe 100, and we only pursue another 50, so 400 fall out. But the ones that work are usually do good, get money back for the government, stop harmful things like I just described, and make the lawyers a little money and the client a little money.
It's pretty strong public services, good policing, investigative capacity, that works. So why hasn't it followed other countries in offering real financial incentives to whistleblowers?
Well, it's an interesting thing. There are no other countries other than America. Very few countries have rewards. The answer is, without whistleblowers inside a large, well-financed enterprise, you never find out about it. And no amount of knocking on the doors and running around like James Bond, if you don't know where to look, how could you possibly find it? And so I've always said that the whistleblowing is the only way, by rewarding the individual who's willing to risk their career and maybe their life to come forward. Otherwise, why would they come forward? Well, they're good citizens. You mean he's going to go live in the trailer and never have a job again because he's a good citizen? There may be some of those people, they're called martyrs, and they're, in churches. So if you look to the history in the United States, this law was on the books, and Ronald Reagan, which is our Margaret Thatcher, our original conservative fellow, it was under his administration, because he was going after waste, fraud, and abuse, that the Congress said, no, we're going to give him a reward. And the Attorney General came forward and initially said, well, that's a bad idea. But finally, they always say, we can do it. We're the police, we're the gendarmes, or whatever it is, right? And we're not going to give our power to you. But without inside information, how do you possibly? So if you look at the wonderful role that investigative journalists perform, they can bring it forward sometimes, but they have to sneak around to find it, right? And they often do it without quoting the source, right? Because they're hiding it. And there's no reason he wants to know, right? If you're the whistleblower and you know that there's been a $100 million fraud, or you're inside the company and you know that the shareholders have been ripped off with a $200 million fraud, or you're in the bank where they're money laundering for criminals doing child trafficking, you should be incentivized to come forward. And I don't think they're going to do it without having a financial reward. And I don't think without legislation, any discretionary system is a bureaucrat going to say, I'm going to give some of the government money away. So it has to be a mandatory reward system if they pursue the whistleblowing lead. There you go.
As a safety net, I guess.
Well, it's just it won't work. So one example is that in 1986, America was spending $1 trillion a year on the federal government. We now spend $7 trillion. So it's gone up. They guessed that there was fraud and abuse, right, of either 1% or 5%. So if you looked at $1 trillion, with all those zeros, in 86, before they passed the act, the FBI and the police and the Army intelligence and all the people collected the princely sum of 87 million. Now 87 million over $1 trillion is this tiny, 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 tiny amount. And by 3 years later, the amount was $1 billion we were collecting. We now collect $3 billion every year. Some years we've collected, against the Sacklers and all, $6 billion every year. But it's still a tiny fraction of the 7 trillion. So there's a lot of fraud out there, and you need a program to have it uncovered. Otherwise, you're never going to find it.
And that brings us to the end of this interview. Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts, for coming today and answering all of our questions.
But I just want to say that it's the right thing to do, to blow the whistle, and it can be very rewarding, and that's what they should do. So, and I want to thank you for your questions. They were very smart questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.